When And Just Like That, the SATC reboot premiered back in 2021, I was excited. Like a lot of people my age, I grew up watching the original series. I loved the outfits, the chaos, the branches, the friendships, the fantasy of it all. So of course I tuned in for the reboot, hoping to find that same energy. But pretty quickly, something felt off. The tone was different, the characters were different, and not everyone was thrilled. Currently, the third season of And Just Like That is airing, and not much has changed. The reviews are still pretty mixed, the fanbase still seems divided, and yet, we keep watching. Which raises a bigger question. Why do we keep coming back to this show, even when the majority of us don't really like what it's become? Now, this video isn't about hating on And Just Like That simply for existing. If you've been watching my channel, you know online slander isn't my thing. This, of course, doesn't mean that I won't be criticizing the reboot at all. I'd also like to explain why it feels the way it does. Why is it so polarizing? Why do some fans feel betrayed? Was this show doomed from the beginning? This is going to be a long video, so grab a Cosmopolitan or a phony Negroni.
Could I have another phony Negroni?
And let's get into it. Let's state the obvious. Nostalgia sells. You know it, I know it, Don Draper knows it.
Nostalgia. It's delicate, but potent.
Right now, it seems like millennials are the prime demographic for nostalgia-driven media. As of making this video, a sequel to The Devil Wears Prada has just begun filming. In a few weeks, Freakier Friday, a sequel to the 2003 film Freaky Friday, is hitting cinemas. There are rumors of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and One Tree Hill sequels, and in recent years there have been reboots or spin-offs of How I Met Your Mother, Gossip Girl, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Pretty Little Liars, The X-Files, Gilmore Girls, Dexter, The L Word, Bridget Jones's Diary, Charmed, That 70s Show, Mean Girls. Cultural theorist Svetlana Boym, in her book The Future of Nostalgia, defined nostalgia as, quote, a longing for a home that no longer exists or has never existed, end quote. And I absolutely get that feeling when I'm rewatching old episodes of Sex and the City. It's that strange mix of comfort and sadness. I feel it when I watch Carrie, Miranda, Samantha, and Charlotte meet dates at gallery openings, or in bars and restaurants, rather than on dating apps. I feel it when they flip through printed magazines, rather than mindlessly scroll on Instagram. I feel it when they know each other's phone numbers by heart, carry paper planners, and when they manage to navigate Manhattan without checking Google Maps every 10 minutes. Basically, I feel it when I see that mostly offline world I remember from my childhood. The home that no longer exists. But there is also the home that has never existed part of Boym's definition. There is no denying that Sex and the City presented a fantasized version of New York City. A glittering adult playground where, instead of cockroaches and roommates, apartments were magically spacious and rent-controlled. The city life was never draining. It was inspiring and energizing. Writing one column per week somehow paid for a closet full of designer shoes, not to mention endless socializing. No one was dealing with burnout. No one was even remotely stressed in this show. Adulthood was portrayed as sexy, fun, and full of possibilities. Romance was always just around the corner, and every personal crisis, no matter how big or small, could be worked over brunch with your best friends, who are like family to you. And I'm pretty sure that this nostalgia for a magical life drew me, and I'm guessing many of you, to our TV screens at the end of 2021 when And Just Like That premiered. Maybe my life felt a little lost, a little off track, but surely Charlotte, Samantha, Carrie, and Miranda are still partying, dating, thriving in their careers, and their friendship would be stronger than ever. Right? Well, kind of. While they technically do all those things, some more often than others, and without Samantha, the tone is different. The characters' lives no longer feel exciting and aspirational. And I think that's largely because the reboot is far more grounded in reality than the original show ever was. And guys, let's not nitpick. I don't want to hear, oh yeah, well then how realistic is it to wear such a ridiculous hat in public and not get laughed at?
She's eating sherbet walking through Washington Square Park. That's exactly what she should be wearing. People will go nuts.
Or why would your dog get cancelled? At the end of the day, and just like that is still fiction, it's still stylized. But what's different is that this version of fiction doesn't present middle age as an endless string of glamorous parties and flings. There are occasional parties, but now they are surrounded with plot lines about hip surgeries, prostate cancers, deaths, funerals, hearing losses, needy husbands, looking at you, Herbert, needy children, family dramas, and that awkward realization that your long-distance boyfriend has turned into a crunchy dad who thinks that giving medication to his son who has been diagnosed with ADHD means loading him up on pills.
You want to load him up on pills?
There's also so much anxiety in And Just Like That. I think that especially Charlotte and her new best friend Lisa, aka LTW, are in a constant state of mild panic, which isn't anything new for many mothers who struggle with being pulled between their family lives and careers. They're always worrying about their kids, their husbands, whether they'll make it on time, whether they're doing enough, whether they're being enough. LTW in particular seems like she's always angrily mashing potatoes while passively aggressively fighting with her husband, which is a whole mood, but still. It's such a departure from the original show where even the relationship fights had a comedic effect.
Don't you bring that flat baby in here, I will kill you!
And here's where the things start to feel conflicted. And Just Like That seems to be torn between two very different impulses, giving fans the cozy, glittery nostalgia they came for, or the more grounded, anxiety-filled realism the writers are now interested in exploring. Sometimes it feels like the show is unsure which one it wants to be, because, make no mistake, it really leans into nostalgia. There are callbacks in every episode at this point. When Carrie's downstairs neighbor is annoyed with her wearing heels at home, she says it's her woman's right to shoes, not so subtly nodding to one of the most famous Sex and the City episodes. Bitsy von Muffling just keeps showing up, no matter how little she has to do with the plot. After all those years, Aidan is still using a hair growth stimulant and a speed stick deodorant.
Wait a minute. You use Rogaine? I didn't know you
It's
knew.
preventative.
And honestly, sometimes it works. You hear the familiar name, you catch the reference, and for a second, you're back. You smile. But here's the truth. For many fans, these characters aren't just characters. They're like old friends. Many SATC fans grew up with them. I grew up with them. They were there during many of my heartbreaks, hangovers, first jobs, messy roommates. And when someone's been with you through all that, even if they live on your screen, you form a kind of bond that feels real. When we hear the term parasocial relationships today, we automatically think of social media. Watching our favorite YouTubers or TikTokers looking directly into a camera and thus looking directly into our eyes can give us a false sense of intimacy. Listening to podcasts can make us feel like we're just hanging out with our good old friends. Look, even I, a tiny seahorse in the YouTube ocean, occasionally get comments from you saying that watching my Sex and the City reviews made you feel like you were rewatching this show with a friend. And while I'm always flattered, it's also kind of surreal because I don't know you and you don't really know me, and yet here we are, all connected. And while it might seem like a uniquely modern experience, the term parasocial relationships was first coined in an academic paper published in 1956, long before the internet, let alone social media, even existed. In Mass Communication and Parasocial Interactions, Observations on Intimacy at a Distance, Donald Horton and R. Richard Wool described people's emotional bonds not with influencers, streamers, or TikTokers, but with media figures from the radio and television. Quote, One of the striking characteristics of the new mass media, radio, television, and the movies, is that they give the illusion of face-to-face relationships with the performer. The most remote and illustrious men are met as if they were in the circle of one's peers. The same is true of a character in a story who comes to life in these media in an especially vivid and arresting way. We propose to call this seemingly face-to-face relationship between spectator and performer a parasocial relationship." End quote. Fast forward to the early 2000s. Sex and the City, a half-hour HBO series about 4 30-something single women living in New York, was primarily targeted at Generation X, but it also attracted a younger audience. Many young millennials, including me, were watching this show as well, often in secret from their parents. In 2003, HBO's own data showed that teenagers aged 12 to 17 made up only a tiny fraction of the Sex and the City audience, just 93,000 viewers out of more than 6.6 million. But as Sarah Hepola pointed out in the New York Times, quote, "Those numbers didn't reflect the show's cultural impact on that age group."
I didn't know you were here.
And I didn't know you knew Carrie Bradshaw. You are fucking fabulous.
As Carly Shortino wrote for Vogue, quote, "More than any other film or television show, the women of SATC had a profound impact on who I aspired to be. What to wear, which cocktails to drink, where to eat, who to sleep with, and how often and in what ways. The fact that I became a sex columnist with a love of impractical footwear, a drinking problem, and wound up living in New York, a mere 2 blocks from Carrie's actual stoop, was not an accident." End quote. And I think that's exactly where the reboot clashes with the fandom. And it just like that often feels like it was made by people who don't really carry the same memory or emotional attachment about the original show, or at least not in the same obsessive way so many fans do. Let me ask you this. To which friend did Carrie dedicate her book? What was Mr. Big's driver's name? With what did Magda replace Miranda's vibrator? Where was Annabelle Bronstein from? Chances are you know all the answers. And yet, in the recent interviews, Sarah Jessica Parker has admitted that she hasn't really watched Sex and the City or even And Just Like That, despite being the show's lead and executive producer. Quote, "Oh my god, no. I don't watch it, never seen it, never seen Sex and the City, most of them," end quote. In the And Just Like That documentary, she says she doesn't recall filming any scenes with David Eigenberg or, get this iconic scene with Bridget Moynihan.
We never got to do any scenes together except for one. I mean, not like sitting and talking.
Luncheon, remember? You interrupted my luncheon.
Oh my god, that's right.
Which, okay, fair. I am not saying she has to remember every line or every outfit, but I do think that her detachment from the original show really highlights this odd imbalance. The fans are still very attached to the legacy of Sex and the City, while the creators are way too detached from it and are more interested in rewriting the characters to fit with their public personas rather than honoring the original show. Wouldn't you agree? My main criticism of And Just Like That isn't that every character is ultra-rich, which is something many fans dislike about the reboot. When I first watched Sex and the City as a tween living in Poland, all the characters already seemed incredibly rich, and honestly, that was part of the appeal. So the fact that their wealth has been maintained, or it even got exaggerated in the reboot, feels consistent to me. I'm also not bothered at all by how unrelatable the characters' lives can be, which is another thing that seems to upset many fans of the SATC universe. Personally, my favorite stories are about people whose experiences are nothing like mine. Isn't that the whole point of fiction? I also noticed that, especially on TikTok, many fans find Carrie's unfurnished apartment unrealistic in the 3rd season, and I disagree. I think it's actually kind of brilliant, because to me it reads as a deliberate visual reference to Breakfast at Tiffany's, which has been referenced in Sex and the City many times before. Look, A glamorous woman lives alone in an unfurnished apartment with a cat, although Carrie's cat has a name. Sure. Oh my god, is this why in Carrie's book the main character doesn't have a name? Because it's like reversed?
The woman had survived the treacherous journey, mostly intact.
And Breakfast at Tiffany's, Holly has 2 neighbors, a foreigner who can't sleep because of, well, her, and a writer with whom she falls in love. And just like that, there is just one neighbor who combines all those traits. Hopefully. The title card's color is Tiffany blue. One of the season 3 episodes is literally titled Carrie Go Lightly.
Okay, Carrie, go lightly.
And she also visited Tiffany's flagship store with Charlotte. Also, Candace Bushnell, the author of Sex and the City, who based the character of Carrie on herself, was frequently compared to Holly Golightly back in the 1990s. So, realistic or not, I think that's a very clever reference, which also tells you quite a lot about Carrie's emotional state. She tries to commit to Aidan, more on that later. That's why she bought this house in the first place, but you know, maybe some women are not meant to be tamed. And maybe that's why she can't bring herself to fully decorate her space, which Aidan only breaks. And speaking of Aidan, I know that this scene went extremely viral, probably because of our parasocial relationship with this character, but honestly, have we all forgotten that Mr. Big did almost the exact same thing back in the very first episode of And Just Like That? Yeah, I guess we have forgotten. What I would call my real issue with this show is its complete lack of artistic direction. It often feels like the writers are either guessing what the audience wants to see or reacting to criticism regarding their previous creative decision rather than leading with a clear creative vision. As a result, this series is just so chaotic. Plotlines are constantly getting dropped or reworked. Characters' personalities shift season to season, and the overall storytelling feels disjointed and inconsistent. For example, when And Just Like That premiered in late 2021 during the global pandemic, many fans were hoping for the kind of escapist, high-octane glamour the franchise had become known for. You know, something light and fluffy to lift people's spirits, if you will, during a time of global anxiety and uncertainty. Instead, the first season of And Just Like That turned out to be incredibly serious and grim, with plotlines centering on themes of death and grief. But do you know why the creators chose to go with a more somber than light tone for the reboot? Yeah, I'm afraid we have to talk about the Sex and the City 2 movie. Okay, let's jump down memory lane. It's May 2008, and the first Sex and the City movie premieres as a major commercial success. Despite some mixed reviews from the press, sometimes disappointed with the character's lavish lifestyle and happy endings, the movie earns $26 million on its opening day and $56 million over its first weekend in the US and Canada alone. But then, just a couple of months later, in September 2008, the global financial crisis hits. The economy tanks. Meanwhile, the second Sex and the City movie gets greenlit, and the showrunner, Michael Patrick King, faces a dilemma. How does one continue a story built on luxury and glamour in a world suddenly rocked by financial collapse? Well, his solution wasn't to scale things back and to make the characters struggle financially as well, but to bump up the glamour and create the world even more indulgent than before. A feast for the eyes for people tightening their belts all over the world. And this time, though, it backfired. Critics trashed the movie for being tone-deaf, excessive, and for its deeply disrespectful portrayal of Middle East, of its people, culture, religion, which felt wildly out of touch and was based on little to no research.
Condoms! Condoms! Yes! Condoms!
Now, I think it's important to note that in 2018, Michael Patrick King admitted that he may have, quote, miscalculated what people would be in the mood for, end quote, but then he defended, quote, the beauty and the audacious comedy and culture clashing danger. Whatever that means. But there you have it. That's the real reason why the first season of And Just Like That was so heavy and serious in tone. It was an overcorrection, a direct response to the second movie's backlash. The last time the world was going through a difficult time, to put it lightly, the creators leaned into the glamour and excess, and they were criticized for being tone deaf. So this time around, they did a complete 180, and it didn't land well either. And to be honest, this reactionary damage control didn't stop there, and it just keeps on repeating season after season of the reboot. Another And Just Like That season 1 criticism was that the reboot felt incredibly sexless, due largely to Kim Cattrall's absence, whose character, Samantha, provided the majority of sex scenes in the original show. So, the second season of the reboot premiered with, for lack of better words, getting ready for bed montage? Another case is Che Diaz, the non-binary character that so many fans disliked for their corny personality and their cartoonish portrayal of queer identity. In response, the writers first tried to humanize their character in the second season by subjecting them to a string of creative and personal failures, like losing their TV pilot, then a house in LA, making them take a less glamorous job, and finally break up with Miranda. And when that still didn't help, their character got written off and didn't return to the third season.
Woke moment!
I also suspect that the current choice of plot lines might be yet another way to overcorrect the previous artistic choices that were based on little to no research. Have you noticed that in the third season of And Just Like That, the majority of plot lines, besides the family dramas, revolve around being a creative person in the media, pitching a 10-episode TV series, losing an editor, being afraid of getting cancelled because of hiring a man to work on a show about women, becoming a meme, resenting going on a promotional tour, location scouting, living next to the anxious writer, being an anxious writer, worrying about audience reception. It's almost as if the writers have sworn to only ever write about what they personally know. And look, I so much prefer this approach over the previous one, but I'm just very surprised there is no middle ground. Don't they know that research exists? Then there is the Carrie voiceover debacle. One of the inseparable parts of the SATC universe is Carrie's voiceover, which ties all the storylines in each episode and gives the show its iconic tone. And Just Like That famously ditched the voiceover almost completely, aside from the "and just like that" at the end of the episode. In 2022, Michael Patrick King explained, quote, "I always knew there would be no voiceover because the thesis of the show is that Carrie has no overview. She's in it," end quote. And yet now, in the third season, Carrie's voiceover is kind of back? True. It's far from being the same as in the original show. The new voiceover sounds like an audiobook of Carrie's historical novel that also only applies to her life and not to the rest of the characters like it was in SATC. But it's there. Once again, this decision feels like a response to fan expectations, rather than the writers following through on their own artistic vision.
I've been asking myself, was Big a big mistake?
Then there is the back and forth with Carrie's relationships. Many fans were disappointed that the original series ended with Carrie choosing Mr. Big and not Aidan. So fast forward to today, the reboot kills off Mr. Big at the beginning of the first season, and Carrie ends up in a long-distance relationship with Aidan, presumably to please the Team Aidan part of the Sex and the City audience. And yet, no one seems happy. Because you know what they say. When you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. And that's my real issue with this show, because the decision to make Carrie date Aidan again is not only not rooted in the character's psychology, but it really waters down the show's legacy and its lasting message. Ultimately, the Sex and the City franchise has become the story of a woman bouncing between two men for over 30 years. Meanwhile, Candace Bushnell is still single. As I mentioned earlier, many Sex and the City fans disliked how much the characters had changed in the reboot. Some were disappointed by And Just Like That's somber tone. Others found the characters' extreme wealth unrelatable. But I couldn't help but wonder, what if they hadn't changed at all? What if And Just Like That had kept that sparkly and hedonistic tone of Sex and the City? Would everyone be satisfied then? Would there finally be no backlash? Honestly, I doubt it. Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen a truly good reboot? Not even one that outshines the original, just one that feels genuinely satisfying. I have, just once. Twin Peaks: The Return is, in my opinion, an excellent piece of media. It's even weirder and more twisted and surreal than the original. The casting is brilliant. Michael Cera plays Lucy and Andy's son. Laura Dern is Diane?
Diane!
Iconic. 10 out of 10, no notes. But most reboots leave the fandom disappointed because, and I'm gonna hold your hand when I say this, nostalgia is impossible to recapture. We all have rose-colored memories when it comes to the original material. We idolize it, we forget its flaws, we also forget its legacy always belongs to a different time. And that's why I think And Just Like That and pretty much every reboot of an iconic TV show or movie is always doomed from the start. And Just Like That is not Sex and the City, and it will never be, because Sex and the City is frozen in time. And we can't go back. The culture has changed. The world has changed. Hopefully, we've changed. In fact, I believe And Just Like That would have received way better reviews if it had been an entirely original show. Imagine everything stays the same. The fashion, the storylines, the tone, the jokes. But instead of Carrie, Charlotte, and Miranda, it's about a new group of characters. This isn't Charlotte and Harry. She didn't convert to Judaism for him. He isn't her divorce lawyer. They don't live in her settlement apartment from Troy McDougal, something And Just Like That loves to omit. It's Patricia and Michael. And they're just an affluent mixed Jewish family living in New York City and dealing with school admissions and prostate cancer. No legacy, no baggage. In fact, most people who truly enjoy watching And Just Like That have never seen Sex and the City.
There must be two And Just Like That's, because when I'm out in the real world and I hear women of a certain age talking about that show, they love that show. When I come on here and I see the young people talking about that show, y'all hate that show.
I'd like to finish this video with a quote from a very wise woman whom I admired most of my life, at least until very recently. Her name is Miranda Hobbs.
Maybe that's the problem.
What?
Your expectations were too high. Of course you were disappointed.
Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, congrats! Your attention span is officially better than 90% of YouTube viewers. Now, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you very soon. Bye!